Korn Ferry Tour has announced a modified schedule for the remainder of 2020 that will include a full calendar of events to be part of a one-time combined 2020-21 season. The tour plans to start back on June 11th, the same day as the PGA Tour's expected restart. Well, the one-time combined 2020-21 season is set to resume with the Korn Ferry Challenge at TPC Sawgrass's Dye course on June 11th. And there have also been 5 new events added to the schedule. The tour will not have a graduating class in 2020 as they normally would. However, the top 10 players in points following the conclusion of this year's Korn Ferry Tour Championship will be granted access into all PGA Tour additional events for 2020 to 2021. So, guys, Paige, Robert, I'll start with you here because there's a lot to dive into and there's a big trickle-down effect with all of these decisions. But, Robert, what do you like about the changes that they've made to this schedule going forward?
Well, one of the oldest events on the PGA Tour is the Texas Open in San Antonio, and that got erased because of COVID and this odd schedule we're having to go under this year. But it just got replaced by 2 Korn Ferry events. I really like this. This is a fantastic area, an unbelievably good facility on site as far as practice goes. The huge hotel right there on cue. There it is, huge hotel on site. It's a great place to hole up for 2 weeks, give the community some golf that they were starved, that they're missing out on this year. And so that's a great thing for them to come in there for 2 weeks in a row. Great food, too, in San Antonio, so they're not going to be missing out on that.
They're not missing out on the food, for sure. But I
Nope.
like the added 5 events total. Those 2 are 2 of the 5 that were mentioned. I can appreciate that the Korn Ferry Tour was able to leverage their position with the PGA Tour to get these events on the schedule. It's extremely difficult to be a full-time Korn Ferry Tour player, make a good living. The COVID-19 times have made it that much more difficult. So financially, I appreciate the fact that they're able to add 5 new events to the schedule to help support these players, give them opportunities to play, to earn a living, and to compete. So disappointing, obviously, that they're not going to be graduating more players, giving them more access, but they've done a very good job of continuing to give them opportunities for the remainder of this year.
Damon, one player looking to capitalise on those Korn Ferry Tour opportunities is Eric Compton. I know you caught up with him. Now, he has lived the bubble boy life for many years. He's fought for his card on the PGA Tour many times. How has he acknowledged the changes that we've seen on the schedule coming up on the Korn Ferry Tour?
You know, Anna, the first thing he did was acknowledge that this was a sports conversation, a professional sports conversation. The difficulties in this realm are different and pale in comparison to some of the things that, you know, folks are dealing with in this era of COVID-19. But he did say there are stresses for the Korn Ferry Tour officials trying to put a schedule together. He told me the tour has sent checks of $5,000 to the members, and that's especially important for young players. He told me that there are some that are taking second jobs right now, working at supermarkets like Publix because they just don't have the means. They don't have the financial backing or the sponsors. And he also told me for someone like him personally, he has a sponsor, a Kane Anderson, a real estate company that's actually backing him right now, but also he's got more overhead. He's got a lived life. A lot of those players in their 40s have expenses and kids, so it's tough for them. But he also, you know, feels this virus in a different way. He's a 2-time heart transplant recipient, as many of our viewers know. He told me that his immune system is severely compromised. He said, quote, "I could die from a virus like this." And because of that, he's looking into getting an RV so he can travel the Korn Ferry Tour and not be exposed to strangers as he goes about and tries to make a living.
Ryan Lavner mentioned in a brilliant article on golfchannel.com that the path to the PGA Tour has just got that little bit more complicated. As a tour, looking at the players across the board, what kind of challenges will they be facing now that these changes have been made, Damon?
Yeah, one thing he said was it'll be really fascinating to see how the players go about deciding how to put together a schedule, especially the top 10, money finishers who have that opportunity to compete in the opposite field events on the PGA Tour. What will you do? Will you support both the Korn Ferry Tour and the PGA Tour just in case you get full status, Robert, eventually. So how do you put together a schedule knowing that, well, you may get into some events when you know what, I have a sure thing on the Korn Ferry Tour, so I better make sure that I compete in 15 to 20 events or more on that tour as well?
It's going to strictly depend, Damon, on your status on the points list on the Korn Ferry at that time, whether you weigh the option to take the opposite field event or not. They're on the Korn Ferry Tour to graduate, to get to the PGA Tour. So it's going to be really hard to say, no, I'm not going to accept this spot in this PGA Tour event to keep playing. But at the end of the next season, their goal will be to get into the top 25 and try to get that full PGA Tour card when things go back to normal. So at the risk of losing that opportunity, maybe they shouldn't. But I frankly think more people will go to the PGA Tour opposite field events in the off chance that they could win or get a top 10 to get in the next event and try to keep feeding off that. But if it costs them their status on Korn Ferry, risk reward.
Yeah, there's definitely going to be a lot of choices for some of these players moving into this year that is going to be so different than in the past. I caught up with Kevin Doherty, who's been on the outside looking in, kind of on that bubble, getting onto the PGA Tour the last couple of years. And I think he said it best. He said, professional golf is a marathon, not a sprint. He had a very positive attitude about just having the opportunity to go out there, try to win, try to get that PGA Tour card, even if he has to wait an additional year.
Paige, clearly so much thought has gone into this. It hasn't been an overnight decision. Is there anything that you've spotted, any changes that you would make further to the plan that is in place?
You know, not to nitpick, but I've been touting this for a very long time. I wish that the players would be playing for more money per event. I know that would be very difficult to change, given the fact they've already started 6 events of the season. But knowing that the tournament and the player body is going to have to be on the Korn Ferry for an additional year, it would be nice to see those purses bump up just a little bit, if I were to be a little bit selfish about it.
Paige, is a great point that you bring up, and Eric brought it up as well. He said, listen, the difference between the PGA Tour purses and the Korn Ferry Tour purses, it's massive. You basically have to finish inside the top 20 on a Korn Ferry Tour event, really just to break even when you factor in the travel expenses and meals and the caddy fees, etc. So that's going to be another kind of obstacle that the players are dealing with going forward.
Well, always, the expenses are probably more on the Korn Ferry than they are on the PGA Tour, because of the more out of the way places they have to get to and the things that aren't covered for free the way they are some of the players on the PGA Tour. But to go back to getting into just the opposite field events, if you get in that top 10, to expand their chances, if I could, and I'm not in on the logistics meeting of these things, but I think this season, when it comes up, each time a player wins on Korn Ferry, they should get an exemption into the next PGA Tour event. Just like if you had top 10 in a PGA Tour event, one win on Korn Ferry gets you at least in that one next week on tour to give you at least a chance to get out there, make some real money, maybe even live the dream and get your PGA Tour card.
Well, as we mentioned, it is great to see more playing opportunities available on the Korn Ferry Tour schedule that is coming up. It won't be easy, but I'm sure players will make the most of it. And the Korn Ferry Tour is scheduled to kickstart back again on June 11th.